But in this moment, I'm most blessed to enjoy life as a new mother and the continued perspective and appreciation for the invaluable experience that all of life brings. And that said, I'm so grateful to be a part of this beautiful and inspired conference. It's with my great pleasure to introduce our final keynoter for the day, Dr. Martin Ball. Dr. Martin W. Ball is a pioneer and provocative visionary in the field of entheogenic non-duality. He's the author of numerous groundbreaking books on entheogens and non-dual experience and personal transformation, both fiction and nonfiction. He's developed an original approach to describing and understanding the nature of the human ego and how entheogens and psychedelics can be used as highly specific energetic tools to not only transcend, but also transform the ego. His books include Entheogenic Liberation, Being Human, and Being Infinite. He is best known for his deep understanding of the nature of 5-MeO-DMT, aka the God molecule. Martin, welcome to the stage.
Why, thank you. It's good to be here. So I'll just start off by saying hello to everyone. I can't see you. I presume that you can see me now. And it's a little bit weird. I like talking in front of an audience because I like seeing people's reactions, but I don't get to do that here. So I'm just going to have to imagine what it is that you're doing and how you're reacting. But it's great to be here, and just a huge thank you to Michael and Jacqueline for putting this on. I know it's been a great deal of work, and you might just think, just, put a bunch of people together on video chat. And obviously it's been a lot more than that. So thank you to both of them, and to whoever is out there in the audience. Again, I don't know, I can't see you, so it's kind of weird. I can see myself on the screen, but I'm going to try and look in the camera so that, we can really just look like right at each other, okay? And we can have like an intimate time and just sort of talk about non-duality, okay? So my talk, we see you, great. My talk today is on molecular mysticism. And so, if you're at all familiar with me and what I talk about, you know that means that I'm going to end up talking to you about 5-methoxy-dimethyltryptamine and why that is significant and important when it comes to non-duality and when, speaking about psychedelics in general or entheogens. Oh yeah, social distance. No social distance, come on, just give me a kiss right there. But I was thinking about sort of the subtitle for this conference, for this summit, of the practical application of non-duality. And what I kind of wanted to start with, first of all, I don't ever plan out my talk, so I'm just going to ramble a little bit and then we'll get into it. But I was thinking about the idea of the practical application of non-duality, and then also just really thinking about the historical moment that we're in right now. And not only do we have coronavirus, not only do we have global recession, but we also have a really profound movement that's taking place here in the United States and around the world about racial justice and racial equality. And it occurred to me that this is related to the practical application of non-duality to daily life. Because, something that people ask me a lot is like, well, what's the point of non-duality? Okay, so you have this experience that everything is one, and that oneness, it's you. So what's the point? And for me, the upshot of that, the point, is that for one, it is an experience of ultimate truth. And it's not a truth that you come to through your intellect. It's not a truth that you come to through your beliefs. It's not a truth that you come to through any decision or choice that you have made. It is something that is felt in every aspect of your being. And it just comes out as, my God, this is what's true. This is reality. And nothing else can really compare to that kind of experience, of that level of deep knowing. It's like when you're in love with someone, you're not in love with that person because you've made a choice to love them. You're not in love with them because you think you should love them. It's not because you believe that you love them. You know it because you do. You just feel it. And That's what the non-dual experience is this experience of deep feeling and deep knowing that comes from that. And that's what I would call in the full absorption of the non-dual experience. But coming back down from that, we're residing in duality most of the time. 99.99% of the time, we're living in a dualistic world, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just the way the system works. It's the way the game is played. But what it informs you of, from that deep level of truth and that deep level of experience and knowing that arises from that non-dual experience, is you start to become aware of all the ways that you have lied to yourself. You become aware of the ways that you have adopted beliefs because you want them to be true, not because they actually are true, but because you have a desire that's there. You become aware of your own projections that you project onto society, onto other people, onto objects even. And you become aware of how you have not been true to yourself through these beliefs, through these projections, through these illusions that we use to protect ourselves, that we build up our ego through these mechanisms of protection. And so we develop these beliefs, these illusions, these projections in order to protect our heart in various ways. But that means that the ego also functions as something of a prison, that it has this history where we've made a choice early on, and then we made another choice based on that choice, and we made another one, and another one, and another one. So we developed this entire history. Ooh, sorry, bumped my table. We developed this entire history that then becomes the false concept of the self that we think that we are, that we identify with. And through the non-dual experience, we have the opportunity to then liberate ourselves from that past, from those choices, so that we can start to choose from a place that we can feel is more in alignment with the genuine energy of reality that we have experienced fully within the non-dual experience. So, the ultimate upshot of the non-dual experience for me is that it informs you and helps you more genuinely and authentically be the self that you are, from the dualistic position of being the human being that you are, being the person that you are identified as. It helps you clear out the places where you have lied to yourself, places where you have edited yourself and censored yourself and blocked yourself and not allowed yourself to act on the true energy that arises within your heart spontaneously from moment to moment. That we spend a lot of time being the person we think we should be and acting the way that we think we should, or that we think other people would want. Now, at the sociological level, I think that this is the moment to recognize that this idea of the liberated person who is able to fully be authentic and be free and be present in every moment, that there is an element of white privilege that comes in, say, American society. Because, look, I'm a white guy. I can't change that fact. I can't override that. And as a white male, that society gives me permission to be myself and to do the things that I want to do. But if you are a woman, if you are a person of color, if you're a person of the wrong ethnic background or the wrong cultural background, we have an entire system that has been built up historically over hundreds of years that deny certain groups of people the ability to not only be themselves, but to be at all, where we have policing systems that are grossly weighted towards putting people of color in prison and minorities and where we have entire systemic structures that deny certain people just at the very beginning. And so this idea that, look, everybody can just be free and be authentic and we can all live in oneness because we're all one, right? So let's just all be one. I think that we have to recognize that historically, that there are systemic structures that have prevented large groups of people from not only not authentically being themselves, but has worked against them just for who they are, from their skin color, from their place of origin, from their cultural or religious beliefs or background. And so that's a place where I see the practical application of non-duality, in the sense that when you as an individual have the non-dual experience, you're able to see the structures of the illusions and the prisons that have been created through your ego. I think that we're kind of having a moment like that right now, globally and here in the United States, where we're really exposing that the larger egoic structure of our society has been based and built upon racism, white supremacy, and genocide. And we have reached this really beautiful historical moment where people are standing up and saying, enough. It's time to acknowledge it, and it's time to change. And that is also part of the process of the transformation and liberation that comes from a non-dual experience, is that you're able to recognize the things within yourself that have limited you, that have held you back, that have edited and censored you, and where you have put internal pressure upon yourself to be something for someone. And I certainly have experienced these things, but again, going back to, I'm a white guy. So I've had the entire structure of society say, go ahead, do whatever you want. Whereas we have whole groups of people who don't have that privilege. And I think that that needs to be part of the discussion of what is the practical application of non-duality. Because I do think that through the non-dual experience, we really can genuinely learn that we literally are all one. But that doesn't mean that we can just spiritually bypass the history and the systemic structures that have condemned various groups of people from the outset. And so I see the transformation that's happening in society as necessary, and that through that action of being genuine, of being authentic, there is anger, there is rage, there is extreme sorrow and frustration. And these things can't just be whitewashed over. They can't just be ignored by just, oh, let's all just have a big hug and let's all be one. Because we already are all one, but we need to deal with the reality of the world that we have created in the same way that you need to deal with the reality of the self that you have created as an individual, and then liberate yourself from that and transform yourself from that place. We need to do the same thing at the societal level. So anyway, that's kind of my wrap on what's going on in the world today and why I think this is all significant. And that's actually, it's a pretty good segue then to talking about the neuromolecular nature of the non-dual experience. Because here we have something that's quite fascinating. So unfortunately, I've actually been moving into a new place today. I've not been able to be online, and so I haven't heard the presentations, I haven't heard the panels. I don't know what you guys have all talked about, but perhaps 5-methoxy-dimethyltryptamine has already come up today. I believe it certainly will tomorrow. I think you've got Racrazam is going to be talking, and I'm sure he's going to be talking about the quote-unquote God molecule. But what I find really fascinating about the non-dual experience, as with any other experience that we'd ever have as a human being, that all experiences are mediated by neurotransmitters. In other words, we're all human beings, we all have bodies, we all have brains, and our brains function and allowing us to perceive the world, to perceive ourselves, to have experience at all, is all mediated by neurotransmitters. And some people get uncomfortable and it's like, oh, you're just reducing experience to chemicals. And I think it's just a recognition of reality. It's like, look, we have neurotransmitters, we have brains, and we do know that if you can change your neurotransmitters, your experience of reality can change as well. And sometimes in really fundamental and radical ways. So one of our main neurotransmitters that we use as human beings is serotonin. And that's a tryptamine molecule. And a basic tryptamine molecule is this neurotransmitter where you can just change it in little ways. And from the basic tryptamine, you can get serotonin, which is our daily waking, hello, I'm here, I'm perceiving the world, dualistic experience neurotransmitter. Another tryptamine would be melatonin, which your body produces, and then your body says, oh, it's time to go to sleep. I'm going to go to dreamland now. I'm going to stop paying attention to the outside world, and my attention is going to focus inward into creations of the mind, which is a simulation of experience, and whereby I can try out different possibilities, I can sort through different thoughts and different emotions, but it's all done in this virtual space, and it's all very private. Okay, so that's what happens when we're sleeping and dreaming. And that's melatonin that allows that to happen. We make that transition from waking consciousness to sleeping and dreaming consciousness. Well, you can tweak it a little bit more, and then you can get dimethyltryptamine. Now, this is also produced in the human body, and this is also the primary visionary ingredient that is found within ayahuasca. And I know Raven was just mentioning that she helps people do integration work from ayahuasca. That's what she's mostly familiar with. And probably some of you out there in the audience can go ahead and raise your hand if you've had ayahuasca. Yeah, no, I can't see your hands, but I'll just pretend that some of you raise your hands. So with dimethyltryptamine in ayahuasca, you take the ayahuasca vine that contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, harmaline, and then you add that with the chacruna, which is a leafy shrub that contains dimethyltryptamine. And this is one of the things about these neurotransmitters, is that they're kind of all over the place. They're inside every mammal on the planet, and they're inside insects and in plants and flowers, and it's crazy. They're all over the place. That, you know, nature is really just one big brain interacting with itself. So of course there are neurotransmitters everywhere. I mean, it would be odd if there weren't neurotransmitters everywhere. But anyway, human being can also produce DMT, and you have trace amounts of it in you right now. Not enough that you're really going to be tripping, but it's there, and you have receptors throughout your body that actually can process dimethyltryptamine. But when you drink it in ayahuasca, DMT is something that gets broken down in the gut, so that, you know, from an evolutionary perspective, maybe this is a good thing, because humans, you know, we evolved as hunter-gatherers, and all mammals contain DMT in them. So, you know, if you were out there eating stuff and then tripping all the time, you know, maybe that's not exactly an evolutionary advantage. That it's good to trip sometimes, but maybe not all the time. So we have these enzymes in our stomach that break down DMT. You put a little spin on that basic molecule, and then you get psilocin and psilocybin. These are the active compounds that you find in quote unquote magic mushrooms. And then if you put a methoxy group on the 5 position of the tryptamine molecule, then you get this really wonderful molecule, 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. And in my personal opinion, it's probably the most amazing molecule that exists in the known universe. And that's why I like to call it the God molecule. And I think it's always important to, you know, really make it clear that it's not that God is in the molecule itself. Sometimes people think that when you say, oh, the God molecule, it's like, oh, well, is God in there? Like, what do you mean by that? That God is in the molecule. God's not in the molecule. God is everywhere. God is everything. God is me. It's you. It's this whole computer interface that we're talking through right now. It's the beat of your heart. It's the thoughts you're thinking right now. It is your breath. It is the sensations that you have on your skin. It is the memories that you're filtering through your mind as you're listening to me speak right now and you're thinking about your own experiences. All of this is God. That's really what, for me, non-duality means. Non-duality means that there is only one being, not two, right? It's non-dual. There's only one being, one consciousness. And that is everything, all the time, in all places, infinitely, eternally, forever, right now. Okay? So that's what the non-dual experience really is. When you go all the way into it, it's, oh my God, it's God. It's all one. It's all one. Oh my God. And it's me, because it's everything. And so it's me and I'm that. And I'm you and you're me and I'm this and I'm that. And it's everything. Okay? So it's not the ego. It's the true fundamental nature of the self, is this non-dual entity, this non-dual being of infinite energy, infinite awareness, infinite consciousness, infinite presence. Okay? 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. This is also produced inside the human body. So here's a place where it would really be nice if we did some scientific study, which I don't think anyone has done yet. So for any scientists who might be in the audience, this is a research project. What neurotransmitters do human beings produce in their bodies when they are having a spontaneous non-dual experience? Now, it's kind of hard to study in a lab, because then you got to get someone and say, okay, go over here, we're going to hook you up and we're going to draw blood and go ahead, have a non-dual experience. So it's a little tricky to actually get that to happen in a lab at will. But most likely, if we could ever perform this experiment, what we will find is that that human being is producing an excess of 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine in that time period and in that moment. So if we were to draw their blood and we were to compare it to when they're having a regular dualistic experience, we'd see that there's a higher level, higher concentration of 5-MeO-DMT in their blood at that time. Because this is the neurotransmitter that gives you access to the non-dual experience. Now, that's not to reduce it to the molecule. It's not just like sometimes people say, oh, well, that's just like the effect of a drug. It's like, no, this is a neurotransmitter. This is what is priming the nexus of your brain to be able to override this standard set of operations through which your brain processes reality in conjunction with the sense of self, because our brain's doing that all the time. How does this relate to me? Look at this object, look at those other people, right? It's always related to yourself as the subject. So the ego, fundamentally, it creates both the subject that you take yourself to be and all the other objects of your experience, okay? So the ego functions at this dualistic function that it creates you on this side, and it also creates the world of objects and others out there on that side simultaneously. And awareness actually is residing between these two, interior and exterior. Okay, so the ego, it's important to understand the ego is not just your sense of self, because your sense of self is defined also by your sense of otherness, by your sense of not self. Okay, and in navigating our standard sense of self, that we parcel the world into subjects and objects and things that are me and things that are not me, and things that I like and things that I don't like, and ways that I want to be and ways that I don't want to be. So we're constantly putting these things into dualistic categories. And again, awareness resides between these two. So whenever there's the interior sense of self, there's always an exterior sense of otherness that's happening at the same time, because awareness is riding that boundary between it. And this is serotonin. And actually, most psychedelic compounds as well. Most psychedelic compounds do not give you access to a non-dual experience. What they give you access to is a very heightened energetic state where you have deeper access to what I like to call the divine imagination, but it's still processed through the divide of self and other. So in other words, somebody's tripping DMT, tripping ayahuasca, and it's like, whoa, look, there's fairies, and look, and there's mermaids, and aliens, and whoa, there's a space station. How the hell did I get over here? And then, whoa, there's weird old machine elves or whatever the hell's happening, okay? But, and I don't know who I am, and I don't know where I am, but I'm seeing and experiencing all this really otherworldly, strange stuff. So that's the divine imagination. It's not a non-dual experience. That's still an experience of I am seeing this amazing, incredible, mind-blowing stuff, okay? So that's how most psychedelic compounds are functioning. So they override your normal egoic sense of self, but they don't completely override it because you still maintain a perspective and you still experience objects, you still experience others, and sometimes it might even, that otherness might be, oh, well, I experienced God, or I experienced angels, or I experienced heaven, but it was I was experiencing that, see? So there's still this divide between subject and object. So that's 99% of all psychedelic experiences reside within that realm. And within that realm, you can have quote unquote mystical-like experiences. So this was something that was done by Johns Hopkins University, where they gave people psilocybin, and which again, that's the active ingredient of magic mushrooms. And something like 60 or 66% of people, they filled out these questionnaires afterwards. They asked them all kinds of questions like, what did you see? What did you experience? And what do you think about it? So they're checking out the boxes. And it turns out that something like 60% of the participants had mystical-like experiences. And this is something that's certainly very possible on a lot of different psychedelic compounds, where here, just notice the language, where someone says, well, I really felt that I was a part of everything, or I felt that I was one with everything, or that I felt myself in the presence of the infinite, or in the presence of God's love, or in the presence of infinite awareness. Those are mystical-like experiences, because if we really want to get technical, okay, so I have my PhD in religious studies, and in religious studies, a mystical experience is generally defined as a non-dual experience. Whereas other kinds of religious or spiritual experiences are defined as being numinous experiences. And a numinous experience is the experience of the wholly other. And so that could be like, oh, wow, I saw God, or I felt in the presence of God, and I felt humbled and connected. So that's kind of mystical-like, but it's not a full non-dual experience. Because again, to put it into just really direct language, the non-dual experience is not, oh, I experienced God. It's, whoa, I am God. And even right there, there's a lot of egos that say, whoa, shit, you can't say that. Like, oh, that's so fucking egotistical. You can't say you're God. But look, sense of self and otherness, that can be transcended. Particularly the particular self that you think that you are. But the I am, that doesn't go anywhere, because that's the core of being. That's the core of reality, is I am. So if you experience the fullness of God, if you experience the fullness of the non-dual experience, you experience yourself as that. So it's just this, I am infinite, I am reality, I am God. And you're also the individual that you are. But that individual that you are is not the non-dual being. You're a manifestation of that. You're an embodiment of that. You're an individuated version of that, and you get to attach your name to it, and you get to attach your personal identity and your personal history to it. And that's the person that you are. And again, kind of going back to where I started, that the non-dual experience, because it's this full experience of the full truth of being, that then it helps you understand the truth of your individuated being, where you're being authentic, where you're being inauthentic, where you are being genuinely yourself, where you are not, where you have trapped yourself, where you have created illusions and barriers and protective patterning. So anyway, 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. It's the greatest thing. Because it's the molecule that when you ingest it, when you take it into your body, and again, your body can produce 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. Most people don't know how to do it. And I think in most cases, your body actually needs an introduction from an outside source. But then it's actually very common once somebody has been introduced to 5-MeO-DMT through an outside source that they take into their body, that many people go through what are called reactivations, where it just starts happening again. But it seems that the full circuitry needs to be connected and energized first for most people. Now, there definitely are people out there who have spontaneous non-dual experiences. And, I've had the opportunity of working with lots of different people with 5-MeO-DMT. I used to do one-on-one sessions with clients. These days, I just work as an advisor, but I used to actually work with people. And one thing that I learned in doing that is that I definitely had a lot of people come to me who had said, oh, I've had a non-dual experience. I've had these spontaneous experiences of unity and oneness. And then I would serve them 5-MeO-DMT. And every single person came back and said, whoa, I've never had an experience quite like that before. I've never had quite an infinite experience before. So I do think that there is something to having the molecule introduced into your body, and then the circuitry is connected, and then your body knows, oh, this is what's possible. And then your body can start to do it all on its own, that it doesn't necessarily need to ingest the molecule. But anyway, so 5-MeO-DMT is something that people can smoke or vaporize. And there's other methods. You can, if you have the pure molecule, you can, snort it up your nose. Some people, it's not exactly my favorite thing to do, but some people like to put it in a little capsule and then it goes up the other end, right? And you can take it that way. But the fastest, surest, most effective route is through smoking or vaporizing 5-MeO-DMT. And what happens is, particularly, it comes in different forms. And this has to do with the basic molecular stability. So there's the free base form, and there's also what's known as the salt form. But anyway, the free base form is particularly active, and it's very easy to vaporize. So here's a molecule. It comes in just this little crystalline form. It's these little tiny crystals. It's all that it is. And when you vaporize it, these little crystals, they get into your bloodstream, and then these little crystals attach to your neuroreceptors there in your brain. And within a few heartbeats, there's this sense of everything is expanding. And it becomes infinite. And then it becomes infinitely more infinite. And then it keeps going and it keeps going. Now, in these first few moments, the ego is still there. And it's presented with a really fundamental choice in this moment. Because from the ego's perspective, the ego thinks, oh shit, I've really done it this time. I'm dying because everything that I think that I am is dissolving and breaking apart. And everything that I think and know about reality is dissolving and breaking apart. Everything is becoming infinite. And I'm never coming back from this. And this is a place where the ego needs to make a choice, where the ego can say, I'm dying, and just say, yes, 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 and just go. And then the ego just completely dissolves, completely breaks apart. The energy of 5-MeO-DMT is explosive and just infinitely powerful. And this is why it can completely override the ego, because the ego itself is merely a collection of energetic patterns, habits of thought, habits of belief, habits of action, habits of gesticulation, of articulation, of facial expressions, body movements, tone of voice. It's a whole package of how we create our sense of self. Okay, so like I'm operating right now from the standard Martin paradigm sense of self, basic energetic structures that anybody who knows me, they say, oh yeah, that's Martin, obviously, because it sounds like Martin, looks like Martin, talks like Martin, walks like Martin. But you know, if I wanted to talk in a funny voice and I wanted to maybe just move around a little bit differently, well, I could put together a whole different package of what might be the self that's over here, right? So I've got a different tone of voice and a different way of talking, and maybe even I scrunch up my face in a different way so I look a little bit different, right? So we're just these characters, that their egoic sense of self is just a character that you're playing, and it comes with all these different patterns of energy, okay? And they're habituated patterns of energy. And these patterns of energy govern what we project out here, and also what goes on in here, and what goes on in here, okay? Now with 5-MeO-DMT, this energetic expansion that takes place holds the potential to completely override all of these structures so that the ego can't hold on to them anywhere. So that's why I said that the ego has this choice where it can say, oh my God, I'm dying. Like I'm totally losing it. I'm going. And the ego can say, okay, yes. And then it can completely dissolve. Or, which is definitely not recommended, the ego can say, oh my God, I'm dying. And then it can clench and it can hold on and it can fight with the experience. So this is something that I always like to emphasize when talking about 5-MeO-DMT, is that it in no means automatically gives people access to a full non-dual experience. It has the potential for that, but a lot depends on the individual, him or herself, that are they ready to let go all the way and have this experience that, again, from this perspective of the ego, really feels like dying? And can it be embraced in a way energetically that says, okay, yes, I allow this? Or it's, no, my God, make it stop. Oh, ah! And people can have these really terrible, horrible, awful, traumatic experiences because you can't stop the energy. You can surrender to it, you can allow, you can let go, and you can expand. You can fight with it, You can also indulge with it. You can get lost in it. So there's all different kinds of ways that people might react to the event. But the thing is that the molecule makes the event possible. And it does it reliably. If you take enough, it will present you with the opportunity to go all the way into the non-dual experience. Now, what I think is really significant about this is not only that it makes this possible, that this crystalline molecular key that unlocks the full non-dual potential of conscious awareness, that it exists in reality. But there's the potential that anyone on the planet can do it. It makes zero difference what your ethnic background is, your gender, your belief system, your religion, your spirituality, your political stance. All of that is irrelevant in the moment of, oh my God, it's happening. And I have the opportunity to completely transcend my egoic sense of self. Now, there, of course, are other methods. There are other ways of having a non-dual experience. For one, some people have them spontaneously. Bing, it happens. Cool. Doesn't happen to a lot of people. There also are various religious and spiritual traditions that have shaped their entire trajectory around looking at how to generate and get access to a non-dual experience. I would say Buddhism is the most developed of all of those, with various methodologies. And, you know, even there we have some pretty stark extremes. There is the kind of do-nothing approach of Zen Buddhism versus the highly structured, moving from duality to increasing non-duality of the Vajrayana Buddhist system that we would find, say, in Tibet. But here's the thing about these spiritual traditions. They are fundamentally elitist in that they are monastic religious traditions. And I'm not saying that the monks think, oh man, I'm a monk, I'm so much better than everybody else. It's not what I mean. It's that a monastic religious tradition or spiritual tradition can only exist in a society where a majority of people are not members of the monastic tradition. Because if everybody was a monk, if everybody was a nun, if everybody spent every moment of every day meditating and working on this process of opening up to a non-dual experience, society would collapse. There'd be no one to make anything. There'd be no one to grow food. There'd be no one to make buildings, right? For example, you know, Buddhism has existed as a religious tradition because there's the monastic side of the Sangha, and then there's also the laity. Those are the non-professionals who support the monastery, who support the monks or the nuns. Or, you know, even we can give another example of there are certain non-dual traditions within Hinduism. There are also very highly dualistic traditions within Hinduism. So we don't want to, you know, overgeneralize when we're talking about Hinduism, because there's a lot of different varieties of Hinduism and different traditions. But there definitely is, say, Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dual school, the non-dual interpretation of the Vedas, which, by the way, aren't even necessary for non-duality because Buddhism completely rejects the Vedas. But anyway, that's a totally different question, different matter. But say within Hinduism, there is the idea that if you're a man, doesn't count for women. Most religious traditions are strongly patriarchal. They're created by men for men. So within Hinduism, you can become a sannyasin, you can become a renunciate after you've gone to school and after you've gotten married and after you've had kids and you've run your business. That then you can say, fuck it, I'm going to spend the rest of my time, trying to be absorbed in Samadhi and reach moksha and enlightenment. And at that point, as a man, you have the dharma, you have the social capital to leave your family and then go spend the rest of your life meditating. But you see, not everybody can do that. Only a select group of people can do that. So the religious and spiritual traditions that point towards non-duality ultimately are rather elitist in the sense that they promote the renunciation of society and highly monastic traditions, and also that they're not really open to people who want to live in society, who want to be in relationship, who want to be in family, who want to be in culture and participating in that the standard spiritual or religious model is we have to remove you from society so that then you may, and this would be using the language of Buddhism and Hinduism, maybe within the next several thousand lifetimes, you'll actually have a non-dual experience. This is why 5-MeO-DMT is so fucking cool. Because you don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be a nun. That this is the molecular key that exists within reality. It's there. And anyone can take it and gain full access to the fundamental birthright of every human being on this planet. It is my fundamental belief that every human being has a right to know who and what they truly are. And that is God. Everyone has a right to know that. It's your birthright as a human being. Each and every one of us is God embodied in human form. God filtered down into a reality enjoyment vehicle that is the human being, that has the ability to both perceive and contemplate the world and also perceive and contemplate the self. We're in a very unique position as human beings, that we have this fundamental ability to know. And the fullest knowing that any of us can attain is the knowledge of the non-dual nature of the self, that you are everything. Everything that you think that is good, everything that you think that is bad, everything that you love, everything that you hate, everything that you want to be, everything that you don't want to be, all of it is the self, is the fundamental self, not the egoic self, the fundamental self, the non-dual self. And so for me, like the fundamental human question is, how do I be myself? So that I arrive in every moment authentically, genuinely, free from illusion, projection, and attachment, and just be able to be with the energy of reality, to be with what is as it is in every moment of arising. In order to do that, you need to know the nature of the self, which is this being of infinite energy, so that you can know, how is that infinite energy channeled through my particular vehicle into this particular moment, so that I can meet it genuinely and authentically, where I'm not trying to be something for someone. I'm not trying to be the way that I think that I should. I am not attached to any ideology. I am not attached to any belief system. I am not attached to any religion. I am not attached to any spirituality. I am not attached to any particular outcome, but I am available to be here and be myself. And then being able to recognize that my true self is also you. So that I know every other person on this planet that I ever interact with. It's another version of me. What I do to that person, how I treat that person, is how I treat myself. And if I hate myself and fear myself and loathe myself, then I'm going to project that out onto others. And then I'll feel justified in my violence. But if I love myself and respect myself, then I'm going to give others the opportunity and the invitation to also be themselves. And if I find a place of stillness in the center of the chaos that is the human experience, that is unmovable, that says, my heart is always open, no matter what happens, then I can help invite that in others. I know you're afraid. I know you're scared. I know you're hurting. But your heart can be open. You don't need to protect it. You can be who you are. You can let go of your judgments. You can let go of your fear. You can let go of the prison that you've used to protect yourself. You can just let it fall away. And you can be who you are. And no, that does not mean that everything is going to go your way all the time. That's another thing. People say, oh man, if I just had a non-dual experience, if I were just like enlightened and liberated, I'd be able to manifest any fucking reality I want. I'd just get what I want all the time. You realize that's your ego talking, right? I'm going to get what I want all the time. No. What you get is the ability to choose to be yourself regardless of circumstances, regardless of expectations, and regardless of outcomes. So there's a freedom there. There's an open-heartedness there. There's an ability to be present there. But it doesn't mean that just so magically, oh man, I just manifest everything I want and everything's beautiful all the time. Because life is hard. You know, Buddha was right when he said life is suffering. You can't stop it. And even some people use non-duality. They use the experience because they want an escape. It's like, oh man, my life really sucks. I just want to go back into oneness, and I just want to be there in oneness and just, and I'm just there like all the time, man. But if you're there all the time, then you're not living your life, that your life is a beautiful, precious gift. I mean, look, God has spent a long, long time evolving itself into these really sophisticated reality enjoyment vehicles. It's the ego. The ego is just like, oh man, I just want to get the fuck out of here. And God's like, let me in, damn it. I've been evolving into you for like eons and eons and eons. And you people, you just want to get out. This bizarre paradox. The human's just trying to get out and wants everything to be perfect all the time. And God is saying, let me into the mess. That's where the fun is happening. Come on. Pleasure, pain, creation, destruction, transformation. What do you think the point is? It's the humans are always like, oh man, the point is that everything will be perfect, like all the time. I mean, if you paid attention to reality, it's like this beautiful, orgasmic, fucking chaos machine. There is order and there is destruction and there's life and there's death and there's birth and there's ecstasy and there's terror and this is like all of it. It's all of it. And, you know, from the perspective of the one being, it's like, don't you people realize that like just perfect peace and unity is like really boring? It's a lot more fun. Like I like to say, it's like, imagine you went to go see a movie and like nothing happened. You'd say, wow, what was the point of that? That was a really boring movie. Well, you know, reality, this is God's movie, okay? There is one actor playing billions of different characters all at the same time. And some of them are good guys, and some of them are bad guys, and some of them are going to win, and some of them are going to lose, and some of them are going to face terrible, horrible, nasty tragedy, and others are going to just have overwhelming, fantastic success. And from the unitary perspective, it's all good. Because it's all just God experiencing itself through multiple vehicles and multiple perspectives simultaneously. And God, you know, it's a little bit harsh, but, you know, God doesn't really care what happens to one individual or another. So it's not like, oh, well, now that I've had my non-dual experience, like God's on my side. It's like, no, God was you from the beginning, was you in the middle, and God is you in the end. And God is relishing all of your experience, no matter what it may be. So if you want to help God out, get to know who you are, and then be yourself thoroughly, authentically. Just dive in with all the passion that you have to be yourself. So to bring it back around again, all of this happens through neurotransmitters, whether you like it or not. Whether you think, oh man, he's just reducing it to chemicals. Doesn't matter. That's how the reality game works. We are bioenergetic beings. We are mediated by crystalline molecular neurotransmitters. That's how we work. 5-MeO-DMT is this molecular key that unlocks all of this within the human vehicle. And it does it reliably, and it makes this level of experience in potential accessible to every person on the planet. Not just a small, select group of people who've spent their entire lives meditating out in the cave, chanting, shaving their heads, wearing cool robes. Makes it available to anyone, everyone. And I think we could use a little bit of that. So I think it's probably time for like Q&A. So I can stop talking now and maybe we can move on to the next stage of the process.
Oops. Excuse me, my microphone. Is my microphone on? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, it is time for Q&A then. Okay, guys, some of you have already posted questions using the Ask a Question tool at the bottom of your screens or in the chat section on the right side of your screens. And we have Dr. Ball right here, so we can get started. Let's see. First question we have is it safe if in my family we have a history of bipolar mental illness? I want to have this experience, but I don't want to lose touch with reality forever.
All right, that's a good question. Ultimately, you know, these are the kinds of questions that people need to answer for themselves. That people who have a history of mental illness, having difficulty sorting through what's real versus what I think is happening, you know, people with a history of distinguishing reality from fantasy and thought and projection. Psychedelic experience, in some cases, can exacerbate that. It can make it worse. Though sometimes it can also kind of catapult someone into such a profound crisis that they can come out of it with a little bit of clarity that they didn't have before. Now, what I always recommend for anybody doing any kind of psychedelic work, and also just for anyone in the audience who doesn't know, like another standard word that gets used here is entheogen. and that means generating the experience of God within, that's a synonym for psychedelic or hallucinogen. So anyone working with psychedelics or entheogens, I always recommend that educate yourself before jumping in. Find the best possible sources. And so that means, it doesn't mean like going on YouTube and like, oh, I want to watch videos. No, do some actual research. And then what is very, very important is working with a skilled facilitator, not just, hey, I'm going to get some of this stuff on my own. And I always really strongly emphasize this with 5-MeO DMT. Do not attempt at home by yourself. Have someone who is a skilled facilitator work with you, because no matter what you think this experience is that I'm talking about here, if you haven't had it, you have no fucking clue. And I'm sorry if that feels insulting, but it's simply true. You have no idea, because every idea that you have is a concept that exists within the realm of duality. And when you break all that apart and you enter into the full non-dual experience, there is no idea that conceptualizes that. There is no way to put that into concrete language. So it's very important that you educate yourself and have a skilled facilitator and someone that, if, for example, if you do have a history of mental difficulties, to talk with your facilitator about that and make sure that they are comfortable working with you. That education, education, education. Just say no, right? K-N-O-W, just say no.
Sounds good there. Also, you mentioned something about being prepared to die. I think that really rang with me. And I appreciate that. That's helped me through many a trip.
Yeah, that's really a fundamental thing that that you can ask yourself, like, well, am I prepared to die for this? And if you think, well, maybe not, then don't do it. But if your answer is yes, 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 yeah, I'm ready to die. And see, I mean, the beauty is that you don't.
Right.
You just think that you're dying. And you go through the whole process. Yeah, you go through the whole process of dying and letting go and, oh, I'm never coming back. And then like 20 minutes later, you're like, what the fuck? I'm back. How did that happen? Okay, so that's the beauty of it. But be prepared to let go of everything. And also that means be prepared that, you may go into it with certain spiritual or religious beliefs. Be prepared to let those go, because you know what? It's not that. Whatever your spiritual religious beliefs are, it's not that. I guarantee you it's not that. Be prepared to be surprised.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see. So then the next question we have, Martin, I'd love to hear when you became aware of your true self, and that they know that you've studied religion in college, and they're wondering if that triggered a curiosity. I'm also wondering.
Yeah, no. I got into studying religion because in college I was a philosophy major, but I wanted to study Buddhist philosophy because that was the philosophy that made the most sense to me. But to study Buddhist philosophy, you had to go to religious studies, because philosophy departments are totally ethnocentric, and you only study like dead white guys from Europe, a bunch of old Greek dudes and some French and German dudes and stuff like that, and everything. And your philosophy professor will tell you, well, only we have philosophy. Everybody else has religion. So, if you want to be religious, go study. But anyway, so I started studying Buddhism in religious studies. And then just because of my own personal interests, friends told me, well, gee, Martin, you really should try some psilocybin mushrooms because we think you'd like them. So that kind of got me into psychedelics, and that got me into studying shamanism and comparative mysticism. So I studied all this stuff, but it wasn't until my first 5-MeO DMT experience, which happened at the very beginning of 2008, where within an instant, which I just one breath, it was, oh my God, this is it. This is it. This is it. And I knew instantaneously this was the experience I'd been looking for my entire life, but had no idea that I'd been looking for. And, you know, I came back from that. I was like, oh my God, God's real and it's me. What the fuck? Right? So, I mean, I'd studied all this stuff intellectually, but to actually be confronted with it was just absolutely mind blowing. And then that started a process of energetically opening and transforming. And, you know, so I write lots of books. So my story about that is my book, Being Infinite, which tells about my own personal process with all of that. But it was my first 5-MeO DMT experience in early 2008. That was the first, like, absolutely, like, oh my God, this is it. This is absolutely it.
So basically, it sounds like you've got, what's that, 12 years, a good doctorate in that sacred toad medicine.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what is next then? Yeah, Martin, I'd love to hear how you compare 5-MeO DMT experience with normal DMT versus mushrooms, LSD, and other psychedelics. I know you hit on that a little bit, but I know people also, there's the God level of mushrooms, and you know, people talk about experiencing God. I wonder.
Yeah. Well, see, here's the thing: is that 5-MeO DMT really belongs in a category all on its own. Okay, it's just that special. Another phrase that I like to use with 5-MeO DMT is I call it the crown jewel of the entheogens. That it's like, it's just the full package. It's just this instantaneous, just like, oh my God. Okay. Now, quote unquote, regular DMT is beautiful and it's fantastic and it's amazing, but it's kind of like comparing a psychedelic funhouse to a celestial palace. You know, I mean, it's just way different orders of magnitude. And see, most psychedelics have a very strong visual component to them. Like DMT is very, very visual. But here's the thing, that vision itself is a dualistic operation, because there is the person or the subject seeing, and then there is that which is seen. So whenever you're seeing something or looking at something, you're having a dualistic experience. Whereas 5-MeO DMT, it has some visual aspects to it. Okay, so like regular DMT is like super high definition, neon bright, infinite fractals, infinite geometry, infinite, but it's all just, it's very structured. There's a geometric fractal structure to it. And that can also turn into entities and beings and realms and places and fantastic architecture and all kinds of stuff. But 5-MeO DMT is just like pure white light filtered through an infinite fractal prism that it kind of rainbows out on the edges. And it's more the feeling, because again, the ego is dissolved, whereas most psychedelic experiences, the ego doesn't get dissolved. It can, but it tends to be very temporary. So for example, like out of a 6-hour mushroom trip, somebody might have like 30 seconds of full transcendence of the ego, and then the ego comes back in, because the ego is tremendously resilient. And again, the ego is just a collection of energetic structures. And as soon as those energetic structures can reassemble, they will. And so 5-MeO DMT produces an extended period of time where these structures of the ego are not able to form. They're not able to function during that time period, so that you get this extended, which again, it only lasts like 10 to 20 minutes at the most, but it feels like it's eternal, because it is eternal. It's just the infinite eternity of being. So you get to really bask in it in a way that you just don't. And so energetically speaking, you know, like mushrooms are down here, then ayahuasca is up here, then DMT is up here, and then 5-MeO is through the roof.
Roller coaster. Be ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, then. So kind of similar question that I know you've sort of hit on, but it's got a couple votes here. So we'll hit on it one more time. Do you see any fundamental difference between the experience of non-duality via 5-MeO-DMT and Samadhi states that arise from, say, deep meditation or yoga?
I think 5-MeO-DMT is more powerful.
Very similar here.
I think that they are fundamentally the same, but see what happens with, okay, so I'll back up a little bit. Okay, so someone's sitting in meditation. It's kind of awkward chair to be doing this, right? You're sitting in meditation, and what tends to happen is that the non-dual experience is achieved more through a mental liberation, right? Because you're quieting the system down, you're calming the system down, and then you enter into this state of nothingness, everything, all at once, infinite, eternity, okay? But the body, in a sense, is kind of transcended during that. And so it's a very mental kind of event. Now, when someone has a full non-dual experience on 5-MeO-DMT, what happens is their body opens up and it becomes hyper energized. And it's just like, it's like infinite levels of current through every molecule of your being. And it's just, it's power. It is so powerful. And so this is why I say that, you know, I used to work with people with 5-MeO-DMT, and I had a number of people come to me who had had non-dual experiences through their meditation or spiritual practice. Every single one of them who then had a 5-MeO-DMT experience said, whoa, that was so far beyond my meditation experience that I had no idea that that level of energetic being was even possible. So I think that they are similar, but that 5-MeO-DMT is fundamentally more powerful. And that then, again, like I talked about, after you've been introduced to 5-MeO-DMT, then your body can actually start to do it on its own. And you can enter into these very energetically charged states that are embodied that you weren't able to do before. So for example, someone who is a meditator and they've had a non-dual experience through meditation, you give them 5-MeO-DMT, and then they say, after that, my meditations went to levels that I never even imagined were possible before. But so you need it's like, honestly, I think not all the circuitry is connected in the body. That it's like, it's not quite all connected. And when you take 5-MeO, it creates this energetic onrush that hyperconnects the energetic system of the body-mind vehicle. And it makes these pathways open and energized in a way that they weren't before. And also, the ego tends to block the full expression of energy within the vehicle. And so by getting the ego completely out of the way and then flooding the system with energy, then even when the ego comes back, the channels are more open. So it's more accessible.
Okay. So I think that was, let's see. And then also going along those lines, can you determine if a psychedelic experience has equal value as a natural awakening based on the results of the path taken? This person has had an all-natural path, which led them to into spiritual visions over the last 10 years, no drugs required, they say. So in that instance, what would you say? They didn't need any drugs and they've made it to, is it different strokes for different folks?
Yeah, well, you know, honestly, again, I do think that psychedelics actually made higher levels of awareness and energetic experience available that you don't get unless you've had the introduction. And that's not to put down people's spontaneous experiences or visions. It's just to say that, you know, you're going up a couple levels here. And especially if someone hasn't had psychedelics, it's really hard for them to understand what really is made accessible by psychedelics. And also keep in mind that all religion and spirituality originates in psychedelic experience. That's actually where it started, if we're evolutionarily speaking, that all of this, that our early human ancestors were going around the planet saying, how about this mushroom? How about this leaf? What does this one do? And that, you know, all of religion actually goes back to psychedelic experience, and that then spontaneous yogic traditions and meditation traditions, those developed later. And in a sense, it was a way of making these levels or these states more accessible to people, because the shamanic and mystical use of psychedelic plants and substances is usually kept within a very small elite group, historically speaking, and that more people are able to meditate. And then also, you know, that you can bring a meditation tradition into a different ecological environment, right? You're not dependent upon the mushrooms or the plants that live in that area. But one thing that I will say is that I think that however people are having their experiences is fine. If someone can spontaneously go into a full non-dual state, it's great. But that, again, I do think that the psychedelic molecules, they make it more accessible for more people. And what I do see a lot of is people on the spiritual side of things, where they look down their nose at people who take psychedelics and say, like, oh, you're cheating. You shouldn't do that, you're cheating. So I do see a lot of dismissiveness that kind of goes the other way. But I think that they're all valid. But I really do, you know, because again, I've worked with lots of different people who've come from many different religious and spiritual backgrounds. And seriously, I've never once worked with anyone who got to experience 5-MeO-DMT who said, oh yeah, I've had that kind of experience before. Every single last person was blown away. So that's where I put my money, in a sense. It's like, well, so this person has spent like 20 years in the Sufi mystical tradition, and this other person has spent 50 years doing Tibetan Buddhist meditation, and then they take 5-MeO-DMT and it's like, I've never had an experience at that level before. So, you know, that's just from my practical experience.
It's really an individual decision, and maybe what people are looking out for.
Yeah.
You've attained it and you're good, then that's awesome. Yes. Let's see. So someone wants to know, how do you handle ego revenge? Sometimes it asserts itself with fury once we attain oneness through meditation, psychedelic, or other methods. Ego revenge.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily call it ego revenge, but I could make a good movie title, Revenge of the Ego. But I call it rebounding. That sometimes, as kind of, there's a couple different things that can happen. There could be a defensive mechanism where someone's ego is transcended, and then the ego comes back, and it so freaks them out that then they grip onto their ego even more than they did before. And so that's a form of rebounding that can take place. And then there's also egoic conflation that can take place, where someone's ego gets out of the way, they have a non-dual experience, and then they come back and they say, wow, I'm God. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's me. That's me. Come on, everybody. That's me. So there's this conflation between the egoic sense of self and the non-dual sense of self. What we're looking for is balance and harmony, that we're not looking to kill the ego. We're not looking to always be in a state of oneness, but to recognize I am the oneness filtered through the individual that I am. And so my goal is to live in balance and harmony and authenticity, given that most of my experiences are dualistic in nature. So if someone's ego comes back and it becomes overprotective, that's where working with a good facilitator can help them learn how to trust the letting go process and how to integrate that in a way that's healthy for them, to become aware of, oh man, I put up all these barriers and now I'm like grasping more than I ever was grasping before. So integration and coaching work can be very important there. And this again is why it's good to find a good facilitator who really knows what they're doing, so they can actually tell you, like, okay, so your ego is actually coming back pretty hard here, and work with you. That learning how to trust the infinite is fucking terrifying. It just is. It's both liberating and beautiful, and it's also terrifying. So learning how to be with that takes patience, and also knowing that one-time events are insignificant. It's the process of moving through into greater liberation. That's what is significant. It's not just, oh, I had one experience and now I'm done. That's okay. Now I've had one experience and I'm going to build on that and build on that and build on that and know myself more and practice being more authentic and more honest and more true and more open and more loving. So you work on it. And then if someone just gets into a messianic complex, well, then the best thing you can do is ignore them, because they like attention.
Right. Feeding the demon.
Yeah. You don't want to feed the beast.
Right. Well, let's see. We have time for a few more questions here. You've answered quite a few in there. Where can one legally consume 5-MeO?
Not in the United States, unfortunately. It was made illegal January 19th of 2011 for reasons that nobody really knows. But 5-MeO DMT can legally be consumed in Canada and in Mexico and in Jamaica and in Costa Rica and in a number of European countries. Basically, it's something that is illegal in some places, but not in all places. And there are a number of facilitators, of course, who live in the United States, but it's all super top secret and underground, and don't talk about it. But again, I just want to emphasize: find someone who knows what they're doing before attempting this, really. And it has to be someone that you feel that you can completely put your life in their hands. And if there's anything you're like, oh, I don't know about this person, but I really want to do it, don't do it. You have to trust your gut and trust your heart. Also, I'm an author. I write lots of books. I do recommend my book, Entheogenic Liberation. It's all about working with 5-MeO DMT, what the energetics of the experience are, how your ego can react and hold on or indulge in all the places where people get stuck. And so again, it's about education. I wrote the book Entheogenic Liberation after serving 5-MeO DMT to people for 7 years and working one-on-one with clients and really getting an intimate understanding of how this thing works. And so, anyway, educate yourself.
Good me. Good reading. Let's see. We're running short on time. We got time for a couple more questions. Here we go. Do you recommend working with lighter psychedelics first as a preparation for 5-MeO?
I recommend working with psychedelics in general because they're great and they're amazing and they're beautiful and they're mind-blowing and incredible. But no amount of working with any psychedelic will ever prepare you in any way for 5-MeO DMT, so it's kind of irrelevant. That in the years that I served 5-MeO DMT to people, I worked with a lot of people who had never had any psychedelic before. And in some cases, that actually was good because, so I have the space that I like to show. So this is the person who's had psychedelic experiences and think they know what they're getting into with 5-MeO DMT, okay? So they take their hit and they're like, okay? So it doesn't matter what you've done before. It's not going to prepare you for that. But see, these are all different neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters give you different opportunities to perceive and experience the energy of being through very different perspectives and very different presentations and signatures. So I do think that working with a variety of psychedelic compounds, I think, is a good system of education. And they're amazing. But they're not going to prepare you for 5-MeO-DMT. That probably the best is if somebody's had like a genuine near-death experience. That's probably the only real preparation for a 5-MeO-DMT experience.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, trying to bounce around quickly. Do you offer workshops? We've gone over that. We don't do that anymore, right? They want you as their guide.
Yeah,
same thing.
No, what I do at this point is I give lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of interviews. I give talks, I write books. I am available for one-on-one consultations. I offer Skype consultations with individuals who are looking to either prepare for a 5-MeO experience, or really any psychedelic experience, or also help them integrate afterwards. But I don't actively serve the medicine anymore. I did that, I learned from it, and now, see, one of the reasons that I don't serve the medicine anymore is because it's illegal in the United States, but I want to be able to educate people about how to do it and what the process is, right? So that I only wrote my book, Entheogenic Liberation, after I stopped serving it, so that I felt like, okay, I can be completely open about this. And also, the way that I served it is I would always take it with the person that I was working with. So it's very energetically demanding on me. And it was a lot of fun. It was super intense. And, you know, I've done that. So I've had my fun in that regard. So now I just like to coach and advise people.
And so, so advice for anyone, this is a final question, anyone that's interested. Obviously, we would have them check out some reading material and know before they go and be ready to let go. But where would you direct them right now?
Well, a great resource about 5-MeO-DMT is the World Bufo Alvarius Congress. So 5-MeO-DMT is also sometimes called toad medicine because the Sonoran Desert toad is the only toad in the world that produces 5-MeO-DMT in the secretions from its glands. So you can milk these toads and you can get 5-MeO-DMT that way. And the World Bufo Alvarius Congress, which happens in Mexico City in July, kind of gathers together people who work both with what I call the pure molecule, which is just pure 5-MeO-DMT. Yeah, Homer Simpson licking toads, exactly. But nobody licks the toads. It's like nobody licks a toad because you can't get it that way. You have to milk the toad and then you dry it and then you vaporize it, right? So you don't actually lick a toad, but it's fun to say that because, you know, sounds cool. Like, yeah. Did you lick the toad? Oh, I totally licked the toad. So the World Bufo Alvarius Congress is a good place to find different providers and facilitators. A lot of them come from Mexico because this is a place where it is currently legal. Then there also is the 5 Hive. I forget the exact website, but you can do a Google search for the 5 Hive, and that is an online resource of different documents and stuff like that from people who are involved with 5-MeO-DMT about best practices and best facilitation and all that kind of stuff. But this is the kind of stuff that I write about in my book, Entheogenic Liberation, as well. So, you know, start there.
And then I thought your website, I thought I'd just gotten to know you a little bit through your website there, and I thought it was really informative. So there's a lot of reading there. Not to say to buy you still need to buy the book, but there's a lot there on that.
Yeah, and honestly, if anyone is interested in, if you're just meeting me for the first time, and you're like, oh, I want to hear more about what he has to say about this, there are dozens of videos from interviews that I've done on YouTube. I mean, there's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours worth of material. I mean, if you want to put up with me, so.
I think it's been fun.
Yeah.
Enlightening.